Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on the UAE Projects Market. My name's Colin Foreman and I'm the editor of MEED, and I'm joined today by my colleague Yasser Iqbal, and we'll be talking about everything to do with the UAE Projects Market. I've been covering the UAE market and construction since 2003, and I think this is possibly the most interesting time to be talking about the UAE Projects Market. There's obviously a lot of geopolitical change going on at the moment, a lot of potential stress in the economy, a lot of questions about what that means for the construction sector and the projects market. And we're starting to see some of the responses to those challenges coming through. Normally what we do for these webinars, when we have the holding slider, the sort of the title page, the typical thing that we normally go for is an image of a major project. So something like Maktoum Airport, or some of the other major schemes that are planned in the country. This time I've elected to do something slightly different. It's more of a news shot, and it's a shot that was released last week with the announcement of Dubai Metro Gold Line. I think this is something which is really important. It shows there's a lot of new developments happening in the UAE market, despite the conflict that's been going on in the region, and we'll be talking about that with Yasser's input, who's been reporting on that project for some time, later in the webinar. So a very interesting time for the projects market. A lot of questions that people have been asking about what's going to happen as a result of what's happened over the past 2 months. And we're starting to see answers to some of those questions as we move forward, and we'll be discussing those points today. So thank you very much for joining, and we'll start. Just to let you know, we have a UAE Projects Market report. The report price is normally $4,000, but if you scan the QR code here with your phones, you can get some more information. And also there's a code there, which is webinar 600, which will get you a $600 discount. A lot of the slides today are using information from that report. The report's well over 600 pages long. It has a lot of detail across all sectors and a lot of economic information there as well, and also has updates on what's happened as a result of the conflict and how that's impacting the market as well. So up to date and lots of information across all sectors of the projects market. One other area that MEED's very active in is the projects awards for this year. Those of you that attended last year will remember it was a great event with the Sheibara Resort from Saudi Arabia winning Project of the Year. Again, this year we have the main categories and then the Project of the Year, and it's an opportunity to really celebrate the success in project delivery across the region. So again, if you scan the QR code there, there's information there on the projects award program, and I'm looking forward to judging the entries later this year. It's always a very interesting exercise for me as a journalist. We spend a lot of time at MEED reporting on tendering and contract awards, and sometimes the delivery of projects is something that we're not too focused on, and this projects award program really gets you it gives an opportunity to reflect on the delivery of projects. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on in the region at the moment. I'm sure everybody knows that we've been under a period of pretty extreme stress since the 28th of February. There's been really, it started with the US and Israel attacking Iran, and then Iran launching attacks on the UAE almost immediately. And that's resulted in some damage to infrastructure assets across the country. And really, we can split that into several areas. There's the sort of metals, logistics, and industry. So we can see facilities such as the Emirates Global Aluminium Smelter in Taweelah, and then also facilities in covering oil and gas, and transportation at the airports. Particularly Dubai and Abu Dhabi International Airport, and Jebel Ali Port having issues with debris landing there as well. So we've had really quite a sustained period of challenge for infrastructure assets which are up and operating in the region over the past, for about a 5-week period. where there were attacks coming regularly. The ceasefire period that we're sitting in at the moment has meant that those attacks have stopped. But we still have a lot of questions and challenges that need to be asked in terms of what happens with infrastructure going forward. And we'll be discussing some of those points as we move through the outlook for the projects market. In terms of the economy, I think really the conflict is now, from a UAE point of view, there was that period where there was 5 weeks of alerts and incoming missiles and drones. What we're dealing with a lot more now is talking about what's happening with the economy. In terms of the headline number, there hasn't been an official revision of GDP by the UAE itself. However, the World Bank has issued some numbers, and they've said it now expected GDP growth to be 2.4%, down from 5.1 as a result of the conflict. So that's a significant downgrade in their expectations. Some other interesting things pertaining to the economy. Last week, there was an interesting story about the UAE speaking with US officials about currency swap. The US officials later said that there were several Gulf countries or countries from the region that had approached the US about a currency swap. This just provides a line of liquidity and gives access to dollars. This followed on from comments that the previous week from Donald Trump, who was asked whether he expected Arab countries to contribute to the cost of the war. Obviously, the US military's actions have a significant cost for the US government, and there was comments from him suggesting that Arab countries would contribute towards that cost. This sort of pushes back against those comments a little bit, and it really sort of suggests that really that the support should be coming the other way, given the economic challenges that the region's facing as a result of the conflict. There have been reports saying that the UAE needs it as a lifeline, and it's a form of economic support. That has been challenged by certain UAE officials who've said that that's really not the case. It's just something, it's a mechanism that's there if needed, and it's a proactive step. I'm inclined to support that view, given that the UAE signed a currency swap agreement with Bahrain, which it wouldn't have done if it had its own currency concerns. And then on top of that, the reserves of the UAE are substantial and well documented. So I think it is very much a proactive step that the UAE has taken in discussing this with the US. In terms of economic stimulus and economic support, there have been a number of packages which have been announced. Dubai has one, which is very much for businesses operating in the Emirate to help with things like payment, reduce license fees. Obviously, one of the areas which has been particularly impacted in Dubai is the tourism sector, which is a major driver of the economy, and it's basically looking to provide a bit of support for businesses operating in all sectors, but particularly in the tourism sector. And then similarly, the UAE Central Bank has announced a resilience package again to support businesses operating in the UAE. So that's where we're sitting in terms of economic snapshot. I think it's an ever-evolving story, and something that we're only really beginning to appreciate the full impact of what's been going on as time progresses. If we look at the individual sectors, perhaps when we're looking at the construction sector, the most pertinent one to look at is the real estate market. We can see that transaction volumes have declined from the pre-conflict levels. There are still transactions going on. The Dubai Media Office was keen to highlight the fact that there was quite a large total value of transactions last week, for example. So it's not a case of transactions have stopped. However, the volumes have declined from their sort of pre-conflict level. Last week, there were reports of price corrections. It's a little bit early to tell for certain what's happening with pricing. We're still waiting on data, and that's very much where the market's sitting at the moment. So it's in quite a nervous point while we're waiting for more data. One of the issues in terms of transactions is that the transactions, there's a time lag which is around 2 months. And if we think that we're now coming up to the 2-month period from when the conflict started, we should start to have more clarity when it comes to what's happening with the tourism, with the real estate sector. Tourism, the impact's a bit more immediate. We can see anybody that's in Dubai that there's a number of hotels which have closed. Some of those have closed for renovation, but renovations that have been planned for some time. But the most high-profile one, obviously, is the Burj Al Arab. But there's others such as the Armani Hotel, the Park Hyatt, I think it is. It's certainly a Hyatt Park Hyatt. And other hotels are under are closing for a renovation, but others have closed or closed down sections of the hotels. Also, F&B outlets within the hotels have closed as well. One of the main issues for the tourism sector is that many airlines aren't flying to the UAE, although Emirates is operating an increasing number of flights. Other airlines are not flying here. And occupancy rates with less tourists is obviously taking a hit. In terms of infrastructure, Yasser, would you like to pick up on the infrastructure front in terms of what's happening there, what the outlook is for infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, Dubai particularly has got a huge pipeline of projects, especially in the infrastructure sector. We're talking about Al Maktoum International Airport. There are a couple of metro lines to be added to the Dubai metro network. And in the past few years, RTA has significantly invested in developing the road networks across the Emirate. And there are more schemes coming up, especially in Dubai. So yeah, the outlook looks positive in the near future.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Dubai is a market of keen interest, but also in Abu Dhabi, there's a lot of infrastructure planned. Interestingly, very much looking at engaging the private sector for a lot of infrastructure development in Abu Dhabi, which again is an interesting question that we'll be looking at later on. In terms of oil and gas, in some ways this is the most exposed sector. Obviously, oil prices have been impacted greatly since the onset of the conflict. This is largely due to export routes through the Strait of Hormuz being effectively shut, but also there's been infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier, which has been damaged during the conflict. So oil and gas, a lot of questions there. And in terms of the next one, data centers. Data centers is a sector or a subsector which has been given a lot of attention in recent years. Several of these facilities have been targeted directly, and some have been damaged. I think this is going to ask some questions about the reliability or the safety of the region for data centers, whether there's going to be maybe some design mechanisms to make them more secure, maybe having a more spread out approach to data centers. There's going to be some questions that arise for what happens with data center investment going forward. Supply chains. Overall, supply chains have held up. There was obviously an initial panic about what would happen with supply chains at the start of the conflict, but supply chains have held up. That's not to say that there aren't challenges. New supply routes have been established, and obviously things have had to adapt, particularly due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But there's some interesting land routes that are coming up. I mean, for me, the most interesting one was the information that was released last week or the week before, which was discussing how food products are coming from the UK through Europe to Trieste and then down to Egypt, overland through Egypt, and then across the Red Sea to Neom, and then overlanding from northwest Saudi Arabia to the UAE. So some interesting supply chain solutions that are coming up, and overall the supply chain has held up, but that's not to say it hasn't had its own challenges, and those challenges continue as shipping through the Hormuz is impacted. Very important to get your feedback here. Thank you for joining us, of course. And the question we've been asking on our regular webinars is, how badly today has your company been impacted by the Iran conflict, if at all? And if you could just answer the question. It's important just to get a gauge of what the impact has been, but also for us to see how your answers are changing with time. At the beginning of the conflict, the numbers weren't that high, and it's been edging up as the impact seems to be spreading. So if you'd all like to vote, then we can get an idea of where that data is sitting. Interestingly, very badly is sitting at the moment at around 7%, and it hasn't impacted us at all, but we expect it to. Is sitting at about 8%. So very badly and hasn't, they're sitting at about 8%. And then sitting in the middle quite badly is 37%, and it hasn't impacted us, but we expect it will, is at about 47%. So sitting in the middle is the impact there. So obviously it's something which, although we probably didn't want this to happen, is something which is having an impact on our businesses. Okay. Move to the next slide. Okay, so just to give a bit of historical context as to where we were sitting before the conflict and where we're sitting today, this is where we can see the Gulf Projects Index value of all projects in the UAE. So this is an index value or a value in dollars million, which tells you the value of all announced and underway projects in the UAE. And as we can see there, the market is sitting at a record high at about almost $1.3 trillion. It's a number that's increased dramatically since 2022, when there was a bit of a trough, which was a trough that really came post-COVID as projects were delivered and there weren't that many announcements. We then started to see a pickup in both infrastructure announcements and real estate projects being launched post-COVID in the sort of 2021, but more in the 2022 era. And then since then, we've seen strong growth, and that the market is now sitting at record levels. And historically, just to give that a bit of context, we can see, you know, the previous levels at 2018 was sitting well below $1 trillion. So we're at a record high there in terms of the projects market for the UAE. If we just then have a little bit of a breakdown by sector, we can see here that the oil and gas market was very strong in 2024, not quite so strong in 2025, and so far in 2026 has been performing not too badly. Yasser, the 2024 number is a strong performance there. There must have been something fairly major happen there, but do you remember what that was?
Yeah, I mean, there were two main contracts awarded in that year, obviously by ADNOC, both of which were extensively reported by our colleague Indrajit. The first one was the ADNOC West to East pipeline. It was awarded to the Egyptian contractor ENPPI, an estimated $2 billion project. And the other one was the Sheikh offshore oil field, another $2 billion project that was awarded to the US-based oil and gas contractor McDermott. So those were the two major contracts awarded in the oil sector. And then if we look at the gas sector, we look at 2023 was obviously a statement year for the UAE, where ADNOC awarded the largest ever gas contracts for the Hail and Ghasha fields. Two packages, one for offshore and the another one for onshore. The offshore package went to Saipem, and the onshore package was awarded to Technimont. Both of these contracts combined were estimated to be about $17 billion. So that's why we see the big rise there in 2023.
And that's not unusual for oil and gas, is it? Typically, oil and gas tends to be very large programs that are awarded. It's sort of very lumpy in terms of contract awards over years, and
Yes.
we'll see that difference when we move on to the next slide here, where we see construction, which tends to be more of an aggregate of smaller projects.
Yeah.
And we can see there, as I was mentioning, that sort of 2022, we then get the pickup in contract awards across construction. A lot of that was the resurgent real estate market leading to awards. Perhaps the interesting comment there is that the 2024 number exceeds 2025. Yasir, do you have any views on what was happening there?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the pace of construction in the UAE, especially post-COVID, it has been unprecedented, and that graph on the screen rightly puts it. So we've had lots of projects coming into the market, but then that comes with its own challenges, supply issues, and the capacity issues. Primarily, are there enough contractors in the market to take up those projects, and then the supply chain issues as well. So that I think has led to the not significant, but a slight decline in the 2025 numbers.
Yes, yeah, I think it's more rather than a decline, it's more of a plateau, a plateau effect,
or like a maturing market. That's what we're seeing there.
And then transport related to construction in terms of a lot of the companies that work across both sectors. Transport, we can see a very strong performance in 2024 with that almost 16 billion worth of work. What was awarded that year?
The biggest contract was the estimated $5 billion contract for the Blue Line extension. That was a standout contract that year, and there were few other road contracts awarded by the RTA that year as well. So you see, right after 2021, so 2022 onwards, the plateau, the spike in the graph is mainly due to the road and infrastructure contracts.
Yeah, a lot of emphasis was given to transport, wasn't it, after a couple of years of heavy traffic and traffic build up as the market really picked up. Dubai really put a lot of effort into trying to alleviate that traffic congestion. And I think the metro is obviously part of that, but also the road contract awards that followed. There's been a lot of activity there to try and solve that congestion problem.
Yeah.
Just a reminder again, the UAE Projects Market report, if you didn't get a chance to scan the QR code earlier, there's another chance there to scan the QR code. And again, if you use the webinar 600 code, you can get a $600 discount. On top of the reports, we also have a WhatsApp channel. So again, scan the QR code, and it's the Global Data Industrials channel where you can get updates and news sent to your WhatsApp, which is quite a good way to track news and get alerts, particularly on breaking news that just comes directly through onto your WhatsApp. So if you're mobile or traveling, you can stay up to date with what's happening in the market. Now for another poll question. As I mentioned earlier, the real estate market, we're very much in that wait and see position as we're waiting for more data to come through that will really help us determine what's happening. While we're doing that, I think it would be great to just get people's views on what they think's happening. So the question there is, how do you expect the property market and prices to perform this year? Do we expect it to remain at pre-conflict levels, slight correction, severe correction, or do we expect it to continue growing? So it'd be great if you could cast your votes and we could see what's happening there. Okay, the two lowest responses, there's 4% say it will remain at pre-conflict levels. So that seems to suggest that people think there will be an impact. Continue growing is sitting at 8%. About a third, 32% are saying a severe correction, and 55%, so the majority, are saying a slight correction. So that's the considered view of you, the MEED audience, where most of you are expecting a slight correction in property prices. If we now look to the power sector, we can see again strong growth there, and also in water as well since 2022. I think one thing just to go back to, if we remember that previous slide that was talking about the overall market and the projects index, I think what's happened since post-COVID, which has led to those record numbers of contract awards and sort of in terms of projects that are planned and underway, is that for the first time, really all sectors have been in sync. I think what COVID did was effectively put everything on pause, whether that be real estate, infrastructure, and oil and gas, and other sort of utilities projects. And then post-COVID, things have restarted. And for a few years, those things have all been in sync. They've all been doing things almost on the same growth cycle. What we've seen starting to happen probably from around 2025 onwards is that synchronicity has sort of diverged a little bit as markets start falling into having their own cycles again. And we're seeing that across all sectors. The interesting question, I think, going forward will be whether this conflict is a similar event which causes everything to pause and then we have everything in sync again. My feeling is that I think things will be on a slightly different cycle going forward, and the impact of what's going on at the moment is a very different type of challenge to what COVID was, although there are some similarities with regards to sort of remote learning and remote working. I think the impact of conflict is very, very different to that of a pandemic. That's the water treatment numbers again, like oil and gas, very lumpy in terms of contract awards, and a major award in 2023 really boosted that number to a record high. Another poll question for you to respond to, again, just following on from the sectors that we were talking about there. Which sectors do you expect to offer the most opportunities in the future? We've lumped them up together a little bit there. So there's construction and transport, oil and gas, power and water, or is it something else? I'd be very interested to know which sectors you think offer the most opportunities. I think they all have a strategic importance, but the outlook for them is slightly different. So it'd be great to hear your views. The votes are coming through, and it's pretty neck and neck. Construction and transport's at 36%, oil and gas at 28%, and power and water at 28% as well. So construction and transport win it, but only slightly. So I think that shows there's a good breadth of opportunities, and people are confident about the outlook for all sectors. And I think all three offer or have strategic importance going forward. And the buzzword that we're certainly starting to use now, and we will use a lot more going forward, is that word resilience, isn't it, Yasser? And I think we're going to see all three of those sectors showing elements of resilience in the future. If we now zoom in a little bit to see what's been happening over March, which is the first full sort of post-conflict or conflict month, we can see that there has been a decline in the number of contract awards. One thing that has happened since then is we can see that the number there reported for the number of contracts is 16. We've had a few others that we became aware of, so that number is actually higher than 16. So the decline is not quite as pronounced as it's shown on that graph that was compiled at the very end of March. So what we're seeing a market that's holding up, but is showing signs of impact of conflict and affecting that sort of decision-making process. I think the thing that becomes difficult when there's uncertainty is that sort of final investment decision. And I think as that uncertainty is there, it's going to be difficult for certain project owners to sign off on contract awards. So we have seen an impact. But I think perhaps at the start on the 28th of February, if you'd have asked me what I expected to happen, I would have perhaps suggested that decline would be a lot greater than what it has. So I think, again, the market so far has shown great resilience in terms of contract awards. Now, yes, since really the last 3 weeks, we've had a number of high-profile statements or project announcements, which I think's really given the market some confidence that the UAE remains committed to investing in projects and infrastructure. Biggest one so far is Metro Gold Line. Can you give us some background and tell us what's happening there?
Yeah, of course. So this project, the Gold Line, Gold Line expansion of the Dubai Metro, is billed as the largest transport project ever that Dubai will undertake. It was formally launched on 22nd of April by Sheikh Mohammed. The estimated value of the project is $9.2 billion. Massive project. It will be a fully underground scheme spanning a distance of over 42 kilometers, running from Al Qubaiba all the way up to the Jumeirah Golf Estates. And this is one of the key components of the Dubai Rail Network Plan 2032, the image of which we have put on the slide. So you see there are many lines mentioned there. There's the red and green line, and of course the high-speed rail and the passenger line there as well. And then the other one that is ongoing at the moment is the Al Maktoum International Airport. So there's no slowing down in the infrastructure sector. If we go to the next slide there.
Well, before we jump ahead, I think we need to just talk a little bit more about the Gold Line. I think there's several things to highlight there. One, I think that it's underground.
Yeah.
If we look at what's happened with previous metro lines, yes, there is underground sections for the red and green line that first opened in 2009. There is a small underground section of Route 2020 to the Expo site, but really that not that much of the metro has been put underground, and the favoured option has been having it elevated, which is a more cost-effective solution if you can do it. This line completely underground, which is more expensive, but it's a better urban solution for crowded areas. And I think if we see the alignment for the Gold Line, particularly that section through Dubai to Burj Khalifa, which is running parallel to the red line, is really going to help alleviate some of the congestion that you're seeing on the roads, but how busy the metro itself is in that section. And then the second thing that I think that the metro line is doing is connecting up to newer areas of Dubai, which, as you mentioned, and there's several new projects out there, aren't there, which it's connecting up to.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying that onto the next slide for airport.
Yeah. Right. The Al Maktoum International Airport, it came to a halt, but then in 2024 it was restarted formally. And since then, the project has seen significant progress. So since 2024, several key contracts have been awarded. Some of the key ones are the enabling works for the first phase, which was awarded to TriStar, and then the addition of second runway, which was awarded to Bin Laden Contracting Group. And then late last year, contracts were awarded for the substructures for the first phase, which includes the West Terminal, Concourse 1 and 2. And at this point in time, the bidding is ongoing. I think the bids were submitted late March for the superstructure works for the first phase. So we expected that to be awarded as well. And other than that, the bid evaluation is also progressing for the automated people mover system at the airport as well.
Yeah, very major project this, isn't it? I mean, it's possibly, although the metro project, which was recently announced, has got a greater dollar value, I think the airport is perhaps more important from Dubai's standing internationally. I think one thing we've learned very much over the past 2 months has been how important aviation is to the Dubai economy. If you look at the statistics, aviation is a massive contributor to the GDP and job creation and people employed servicing that sector. And I think if you look at what Dubai has at Dubai International Airport, although that's still a good airport that operates well, and the customer satisfaction and things score highly, it's an airport which is Dubai is starting to outgrow. And I think if Dubai wants to maintain its position as a global leader in aviation, it needs a new airport and a new hub. That's across two things really. It needs the terminal space, concourse, modern, the immigration processes, baggage handling, etc. But also it needs more runway capacity. One of the big constraints at Dubai International Airport is the lack of space to expand and put more runways in. So I think that this is really Dubai's move to keep itself at the forefront of global aviation. And we've found out really the hard way over the past couple of months as to how important aviation is to the Dubai economy. And as we were discussing earlier, the impact on tourism is directly related to what's been happening with aviation. So this is an absolutely crucial project for the future of Dubai. And I think that's why you're seeing that despite some of the uncertainty that's sitting at the moment, you're still seeing progress being made in terms of delivering this project, which when it was launched in April 22, it was given a 10-year timeline, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yes, that's right.
And I think the ambition there is to move operations in one go, isn't it? It's basically move DXB to DWC. So very interesting.
One other thing that I would like to add, if you go to the previous slide, please. So interestingly, there are two more metro projects, rail projects that have been that MEED has reported about recently, both catered to the Al Maktoum International Airport. Although they're not formally announced, I'd like to give a few bit of details about those two projects. One is the Expo 2020 route extension, which will effectively extend that line, connect it with the West Terminal. It's about 3 kilometers rail line. So the contract award is close for the design consultancy services. And then the other line, which is known as the Airport Express line, is also, the procurement has started for the study and design of the project. So this metro line will connect the DXB directly with Al Maktoum International Airport. The one interesting thing about that metro line is that it will have, I think, 5 stations, and all these stations will act as checkpoints for the passengers to check in, drop their luggage. It was almost like an airport terminals in itself. So that's an interesting element to that project, one that we haven't seen before in Dubai, and one that's going to be extremely interesting.
Yeah, and just to emphasize the point that we made at the start, the bids for the extension that consultants submitted, that was submitted post-conflict, wasn't it?
Right.
And the tender for the Airport Express line came out post-conflict. So this is very much stuff that's happening, and happening even though it is happening post February 28th.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay, now the next poll question related to what we've just been discussing on aviation. How will Gulf aviation perform in the future? Obviously being quite a lot of question marks in terms of flights being cancelled, airports being shut as the conflict started. The sector is opening up again. Dubai's been quite quick to open up, but other regional airports have been opening more recently. And then, of course, there's been airports sitting outside of the Gulf Coast area, which are sitting in the region, which have been able to maintain operations throughout the conflict. So how do you see aviation performing in the future? Perhaps encouragingly, only 6% of you are saying it will struggle to recover to pre-conflict levels. So therefore, we've got an expectation that the sector will recover. So we're now just getting into a question of time, and it's almost perfectly split down the middle. There's 46% saying it will take time, and about the same amount saying it will recover quickly. So Yes, Gulf aviation is going to recover, but we're split down the middle in terms of whether it's going to happen quickly or whether it's going to take time. Okay, another interesting project announcement which has been made, which has perhaps not been quite as eye-catching as the Gold Line Metro, but still very important, and I think it has some strategic UAE implications as well, is the fourth federal highway corridor scheme. Yasser, would you like to give us some details on this one?
Yeah, I mean, you put it rightly. This is quite a strategic and important project, given the fact that majority of us still use roads to commute between the Emirates, and this project will be in addition to the three existing federal highways, which is the E11, E311, and E611. Still in discussions at this point in time. The final route alignments are being finalized. This will be about a 68-kilometer corridor that will connect the Emirates within the UAE. Earlier this month, the officials said that they are reviewing additional transport links that will cater to the traffic between Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah, because that's where most of the critical mass overland transportation is. So that includes 10 priority routes for buses, dedicated lanes, and additions to Dubai Metro as well. So there are plans to alleviate the traffic congestion problems, and this is one of the projects that will go a long way for people moving between Emirates as part of their daily commute.
Yeah, I think that traffic and congestions were definitely something that this project's going to address. And I think 2 months ago, our conversation would have probably stopped there. I mean, we discuss traffic every morning when we arrive at work. I think one thing, that additional element which comes from this project, given the timing of the announcement, is how important we've discovered in the last 2 months it is to have a good land transportation network across the UAE, connecting Emirates, connecting supply chains, connecting ports, and making sure that goods and primarily goods, but also services, can move around the UAE effectively. I think this is going to be something which is going to take on even more importance when you consider the issue with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and we'll see more transportation connecting to ports and infrastructure that's sitting outside of the Strait of Hormuz. So I think this road corridor, yes, is a transport and a congestion beater, but I think it's a sign of some more strategic efforts to try and improve inter-emirate transport and trying to support that logistics story going forward. So that probably wouldn't have discussed that 2 months ago, maybe a little bit in passing, but I think now that's a very important dimension to some of these big sort of inter-emirate or federal highways that are planned. Again, just a reminder that a lot of the information and slides that you're seeing today and the data comes from our UAE Projects Market report for 2026. Again, quickly get your phones out, scan the QR code, and there's a discount there available if you use the code webinar 600. And there's a call out for if you want any help or support. We have various products and solutions at MEED. There's MEED.com, which myself and Yasser both work on and report for, which also includes the MBR Business Review, which is a monthly magazine. And then there's MEED Projects, which is the projects tracking database. We have Premium Intelligence reports, which we've given you the codes and links for, but also events, including our projects awards and also marketing solutions. Right now, it's time for some questions and answers. Okay, there's a question here, which is there was an announcement early last week about a design tender for a 55-kilometre rail connection between the two airports. Is this what was previously shown as the purple line? Is there an updated overall metro map? Do you want to take that one, Yasser?
Well, formally it's called as Airport Express Line, but there isn't explicitly any mention of this being a purple line. But I would imagine that the looking at the routes, I would imagine it will be the same line.
Yeah, there was a purple line. It's a little bit before your time, Yasser, but in 2007, I think there was an announcement of the launch of a purple line, and there was a consultant appointed to design it, which got put on hold probably post-global financial crisis, if I remember rightly, which was a line that was connecting Dubai International Airport and Maktoum Airport. And that was an express line that was running a similar but not quite the same alignment as to the one that we see today. So it is something that has been talked about, and it was called a purple line previously. But this one, although I think on the map that I have seen, it was coloured purple, I don't think it's being called the purple line at the moment. That map that was shown earlier is the one that was shared with the launch of the Gold Line. I think there are a number of RTA maps with all sorts of different future metro lines on them, and I would expect that Airport Express, or if you want to call it purple line, would be on that. But at the moment, that 2032 map is sitting there just with the Gold Line. And I think, Yasser, if we sit and think about project delivery, when would the Gold Line be up and running, if we think about timelines?
Well, I think at the moment the focus is to deliver the Blue Line extension, and then it's going to take quite a lot of time to because these are massive, complex projects, so they take quite a lot of time for design and then approvals as well. So it's easily a couple of years down the line to start.
Yeah, we're probably looking Gold Line, a contractor at best, is probably going to be in place maybe the end of 2027, but more likely 2028, I would think.
That would be my guess.
And then a 3 to 4 year construction program. We're sitting there looking at around 2032 for the Gold Line being realised, and that Airport Express line is sitting there probably with a slightly longer time frame. Interesting question though. We saw the airport was given a 10-year horizon when in 2024.
Yeah.
So Maktoum Airport expansion should be opening in 2034. I would imagine that they'd want that Airport Express line open for then. So that's probably sitting on a 2034 map rather than a 2032 map in terms of timelines. We're guessing a little bit on the timelines, but I think we're probably making educated guesses rather than random ones. What future solutions are proposed or can be suggested in light of anticipated conflict to avoid impacting the projects and real estate market and to prevent disruptions to supply chains and materials? I think this is possibly the biggest question from an infrastructure and construction point of view, which has come out of the conflict. One thing we didn't discuss too much at length, and we could probably do a webinar on this just on its own, is what's happening with the supply chain. We heard fairly quickly into the conflict of disruption on projects with things like specialist furniture delivery, bespoke items that were maybe not being shipped through. That then shifted to other items such as facades, which tend to or more regularly imported from international markets, being brought in and being delayed and disrupted. And now some concerns in the market at sort of construction materials possibly being in short supply. And that's really a function of things not getting through the Strait of Hormuz and getting to the UAE's major ports, which sit in Jebel Ali and in Taweelah. I think one solution to this going forward is to put your port capacity outside of the Strait of Hormuz, and the UAE has this option. If we look at, say, Bahrain, Qatar and Kuwait, they don't have that option. They don't have a coastline which sits outside the Strait. The UAE does have that and particularly in Fujairah, there's already a port there, but also in the Sharjah enclave of Corsican, there's a port. My expectation is that there will be moves to try and expand capacity there.
Right.
At the moment, we don't know what that will look like. I think there's various options that should be considered, maybe to increase capacity so if it's needed in an emergency. There might be a decision taken just to establish it as one of the main ports for the UAE anyway, and have that operating going forward. Interesting question there. That then links into what we were discussing with the fourth federal highway and maybe rail networks as well. You would then need to integrate those ports into the UAE's transportation system. So I think there's going to be a serious look at effectively getting the UAE outside of the Strait of Hormuz in terms of its supply chains going forward. And I think that involves development on the east coast of the UAE going forward, and that will help alleviate some of those supply chain problems that we're discussing at the moment. So, very important question, and I think that's something that will be discussed right now, and I think it's something that we're going to see a lot of activity on going forwards, and a lot of opportunity for the construction sector as some of these challenges do require an infrastructure solution. May I ask about marine offshore coastal construction procurement wise? We're noticing a decline in construction. Well, I mean, in terms of marine, I think there's going to be a look at changing the UAE's port offering. So I would expect more marine work coming forward. I'm aware of some tenders already on the east coast to upgrade port facilities. So I think that marine work is something which is coming through. If you're talking there, which is more on the construction sector on coastal, if that's more of a sort of a real estate conversation, we've had some major awards, haven't we, on Palm Jebel Ali, which have been announced recently. So I think there's still a focus on developing real estate on the coast, although perhaps that the perception might be that that's no longer as attractive as it might have been pre-conflict. I'm not seeing that any evidence of that in terms of projects that are being announced, launched, or contracts signed. There's quite a few across Dubai in particular, where there's contracts being placed. So I haven't seen anything particularly on the offshore side of things. Yasser, have you noticed anything in that regard?
Nothing that stands out.
Yep. Okay, there's a question there on why does the Gold Line not extend to the new airport? I think the answer to that is that there's a separate airport express line, and I think the Gold Line's raison d'etre, if you want to call it that, is to really alleviate some of the pressure on the red line in the Dubai area, and also connect up to some of those new residential areas which it serves. I think the airport is something that does need a metro solution. But on top of that, there are other transport needs within Dubai that need a metro solution. So I think it's two requirements and two metro lines. Do you want to pick this one up, Yasser? Is the inflation going to be an important factor driving possible tendering delays?
Yeah, I mean, the longer the conflict stretches on, the greater the impact will be on the supply chain, and obviously there's going to be an inflation in the materials, and that is in turn going to be priced into the tenders. So yes, in my opinion, there is going to be a significant amount of inflation. I mean, I was speaking with the local contractor recently, and they are already seeing spikes in prices for the critical materials like steel and glass and other stuff, most of which is shipped from abroad. So yeah, in terms of certain key materials for the construction, there's obviously going to be inflation.
Yeah, I think this is a challenge for particularly for the real estate sector. If we look at the price that people have paid for land um, over the past year, 2 years, it's been a market where prices have been quite high. So people have paid high prices for land, and they've now got to um, deliver projects where the construction cost has gone up as well. We're then sitting, that was already a challenge. It's something which I'd been hearing quite a lot in the market, but sort of in the 6 months prior to the conflict starting. And that was in a market where the sales price of real estate was going up already. That was considered to be a problem for project delivery. I think that problem becomes even greater in a market where you might have a price correction where your sales price goes down, but your cost of delivery goes up, and you've been sitting on a land price that you've paid that's quite high. So yeah. I think there's some real tightness in the market there in terms of project feasibility, in terms of costs, what people are paying, and then also the cost of delivery. There's a question there on the number of contracts is higher than 16. From memory, I think it was 36. I think and that will mean that the total number is greater. In terms of what it's looking like for April, we've had some fairly major awards announced, haven't we, in April?
Yeah, the most recent was the Palm Jebel Ali villas announced by announcement Nakir.
Yeah,
about close to $1 billion worth of contract.
Yeah, so I think the April number will be okay, but I think it's not going to be pushing the highs that we've previously had. But I don't think it's a complete slowdown. Do we expect any more tenders for Maktoum Airport to buy World Central? I think there will be. That there's tendering activity, and a lot of the packages at the airport are all dependent on one another. For one to proceed, it needs another contract supporting it to go ahead. So I think once the ball is rolling at the airport, which it already is, yes, you do get a lot of follow-on tendering and contract awards. So I think that's a project that's very close to getting up towards critical mass, and once that happens, there will be a lot of activity going forward. Okay, there's a question there on energy projects related to what I was saying. I think the other, again, it's a supply chain question, but the issue again is exporting oil outside of the region. Obviously the region is a major oil exporter, and oil shipments are struggling to get out of the Strait of Hormuz. Abu Dhabi already has a pipeline which connects up to Fujairah, so it is able to export oil outside of the Strait from Fujairah. I think that's something which is going to be looked at even more going forward. I would expect more pipelines taking Abu Dhabi oil onto the seas from outside the Strait of Hormuz. We've already seen on the Saudi side with the East-West pipeline, the Saudis have already approached companies for possibly building new pipelines which will take even more Saudi oil outside of the Gulf and outside of the Strait onto the west coast of Saudi Arabia. And I think the UAE will look at doing something similar. Those of you will remember many years ago there was talk of things like canals cutting across the UAE to solve some of that problem in terms of oil exports. I don't think that's something that will be seriously considered, and my expectation is that it will be pipelines to try to get around that Strait of Hormuz bottleneck. Question here on lots of infrastructure work planned at Dubai International Airport, Abu Dhabi Airport.
Well, yes, at the Abu Dhabi airport, there is, which is still in the early stages, the consultants have submitted bids for the new satellite terminal. So that's another large-scale, multi-billion-dollar project planned at the Abu Dhabi International Airport. Dubai International Airport, not quite as much on that scale, because I think that a lot of focus is now going to be on building the Al Maktoum International Airport rather than investing in the TXP airport.
Okay, and then there's a question here which is a projects one, but I guess has a bit more of a macroeconomic dimension. Projects driven by the tourism sector. How are they going to proceed? What's the outlook for tourism-related projects? So that would be hotels, resorts. What's our view there?
Well, in terms of the hotels right now, like you previously outlined, several of the hotels have been shut. I think that's not we can't say that's a knee-jerk reaction. I think some of these hotels were undergoing refurbishment. So I think this is a time for some hotels, while they are witnessing lower number of visitors, they can undertake the refurbishment projects. I think we might see a lot of those projects coming into the market. And then in terms of the new hotels, we'll have to wait for more data to make our assessment on that.
Yeah, I think at the moment that there are several major hotel resort projects that are under construction. Perhaps the most high profile of them is the Wynn Resort in Ras Al Khaimah,
Right.
which work was stopped there very briefly, I think for a specific security concern, but then Wynn announced that it restarted. This was in March, so work is continuing there. The other one, which is a similar development, and also is the MGM Resort in Dubai, which again construction is continuing on that. So I think ongoing hotel developments are still proceeding, and I'm aware of several major projects which are in the sort of final stage of tendering and negotiations with contractors, which are due to be awarded soon. I think that's the real acid test of where we see the market going. I think if those contracts are awarded, then we'll see that there is a firm belief at the highest level that the tourism sector is something still to invest in. And what we've found historically is that if you have those major landmark projects, other projects follow. There's a bit of a halo effect from those schemes. So I think they're quite important schemes to watch as to when they are awarded, and the impact they'll have on other investment decisions in the UAE. And then just to add on to what we were saying earlier, we're seeing a lot of refurbishment work that's coming up, and these are substantial projects. I mean, the biggest one is the Burj Al Arab, which is, sometimes when you say refurbishment, you tend to think it's a small job with a handyman turning up and doing a bit of painting, but it's a major piece of construction work that's involved there. So some major projects on the refurb side as well. We're running out of time now, and thank you very much for all your questions. We could sit here and probably talk for another 2 hours about the UAE projects market. There's a lot of things that have happened over the last 2 months, and we're not really going to see the full impact of everything that's happened until later on in this year. But I think the important thing is that we're starting to see signs and signals from the government, but B, the business community, as to what sort of direction to expect the market go in the future. Any points you'd want to add, Yasser?
Not really. Just one point that I would like to add to that is that Dubai has proven and has built a very, especially not just Dubai and Abu Dhabi, UAE as a whole has built a very resilient economy, and most recent experience was post-COVID, and UAE was in fact one of the first countries to lift the lockdown and open for business. So there's clearly an encouraging anecdote there. So I think we all hope that the projects market will hold up.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Apologies we couldn't answer every question. We've had an awful lot of questions that have come through, and we hope to see you on future webinars where we're discussing the market in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.